We are living in a material world, and I am a material girl. My dialectic method, says Madonna, is not only different from the Hegelian, but is its direct opposite. To Hegel, the process of thinking, which under the name of the idea, he even transforms into an independent subject, is the demiurgos, the creator of the real world. And the real world is only the external, phenomenal form of the idea. With me, on the contrary, the ideal is nothing else than the material world reflected by the human mind and translated into forms of thought. This was indeed Karl Marx and not Madonna. Welcome to a short, hopefully concise exposé of the Marxist philosophy. This consists of dialectical materialism, which has two main components, dialectics and materialism. There's also another aspect, which is the application of dialectical materialism to history and development of human societies, which we call historical materialism. In this video, we're going to look at the subject matter of philosophy. This is very important because we want to know what philosophy itself is concerned with, how it was addressed by other philosophers, and what Marxism gives us in that regard. Before anything, we want to approach the core components of Marxism, right? Lenin wrote about this in his essay, The Three Sources and Three Component Parts of Marxism. The first one is the doctrine of philosophical materialism, which was a divergence from the religious idealist philosophy of Marx's time, which is still very much so prevalent today. And he got this notably first from George Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel, who was an idealist philosopher who developed a kind of dialectical method. And the other component part of materialism was heavily inspired by Ludwig Feuerbach. And this is a work I very much recommend to read, a work by Engels titled Ludwig Feuerbach and the End of Classical German Philosophy. And now Feuerbach didn't really consider himself a materialist, but Engels acknowledged a broad materialist foundation. He was kind of eclectic and still bound by some idealist feathers, but there was still something there, right? Feuerbach himself was a Hegelian philosopher who was leaning towards materialism. What's important when we discuss philosophy is the subject matter. What does it analyze? What is it concerned with? In the case of Marxism, it is the laws of development of nature, of societies. Spurgeon defines philosophy as a special form of understanding the world, a system of the most general problems concerning being and knowledge, one form of social consciousness, part of the ideological superstructure, and reflects the interest of a specific class. And this might seem a bit loaded. We'll see later on how this ties in with actual material conditions and class society, how philosophers don't exist in a vacuum, right? For example, if you take Plato, Aristotle, both were part of the slave-owning class in ancient Greece. They were like free citizens who could vote and influence concrete policy. Now, going back to the actual definition, like pretty much all of philosophy is concerned with knowledge, the theory of knowledge. How do we know stuff? And how do we ensure it is close to an objective truth? And on a second time, what is being? And what is matter? What is consciousness? Being, epistemology, knowledge, desire, all are forms of social consciousness and are analyzed by the field of philosophy. More broadly, it's an analysis of the most general laws of the world. Philosophy, as I said, does not just encompass ideas from individuals in a vacuum, dissociated from their historical epoch and the economic base of society. In the same way that Marx took from Hegel's idealist dialectics, that stemmed from this post-Renaissance development of capitalism, himself saw the material conditions of the workers. The material conditions are that which influence philosophy. We'll get into religion later because there's a very telling term that was used for when you combine idealism and materialism, and that's eclecticism. And Marx explicitly condemned this. The task of philosophy is therefore to elucidate the universal principles of existence and thought in their development. This is again coming from Spurgeon. And he expands on this by saying that philosophy is not simply a science distinct from the concrete sciences, an extremely generalized and moreover higher, universally synthetic form of theoretical knowledge of the world at its key points in its relationship to man, of man to the world. Right now we're approaching like the subject, what philosophy is concerned with. And the important subject matter here is the mind-body connection. Do we have a spirit? If we die, is there an afterlife? Is there something beyond our spirits? Where does our mind come in? Where does our consciousness lay? Like, is our consciousness given by God? Or is it eternal, like a soul? Or is it a result of a purely chemical makeup? Is matter just organized in a very complex way that makes us conscious? And something I want to stress here is that, like something Kant, or was it Descartes? I forgot. Anyway, they all had this like weird conception of like humans having a soul, but other animal species not having one, as if we were like one special creator created by God. And this presupposes notably like the existence of a God. It's an idealist framing. Note that here we're not saying that humans are not distinct from other animal species. The assertion here is that we, like every animal species, is distinct from each other, but we are not special or made by a god. We are part of this natural world, and we can't dissociate ourselves from it. And something really interesting I saw on a Rev Left episode on Dialectical Materialism is that like the evolution itself was a very dialectical process. So we do know that we descend from the great apes, but what distinguishes us from them? Well, it all started when we decided to just stand up, get off the trees, start walking, right? And when we started walking, get on our spine, and this was a very bold move because now we end up with people like me who have fucking insane back issues like a scoliosis because I don't fucking know, man. Why do I have a scoliosis? If only the monkeys only stayed in the trees, that would have been awesome, right? So standing on our hind legs allowed us to have our hands free. And hands themselves are an awesome, like, evolutionary thing, right? We, like, just look at all the ways you can use your hands that are distinct from your feet, right? It's pretty incredible. And so with the liberation of our hands, we could then use them to perform manual labor. So the hand became an organ of labor as well as the product of labor. It developed with the increasingly complex tasks that we gave them. And with the complexification of our task, we developed like very distinct languages with a lot of nuance. And the Marxist understanding of this, it was heavily influenced by Darwin too, is that some kind of concept of a species being, right? Human nature makes us social, conscious beings that labor. The Marxist framework of dialectical materialism is therefore the study of the motion and development of natural, social, and spiritual reality. Analyzes the forms and methods of cognizing the world, man and his existence in the world. It evolves an integral system of views of the world, our place within it, the relationship between consciousness and matter, so on and so forth. Back to prior thinkers, Descartes viewed philosophy as the highest wisdom you can achieve by pure logic. John Locke and Hume saw the task of it as elaborating a theory of knowledge and morality. Oftentimes, like, as I said, philosophy is very concerned with knowledge itself. How do you know stuff? But also morality. And morality is a very abstract concept, and it's something a lot of us Marxists don't really touch on because morality is a soft thing. It's hard to justify a universal moral framework that works for all epochs and is precisely concerned with like general solid laws. How do you define the morality of a nation's right to self-determination? It's not as straightforward as just saying it's good or it's bad or it's evil or it's beneficial, right? For Rousseau, so Jean-Jacques Rousseau, it was the inequality among people. And for Hegel, it was the highest stage of theoretical thought, the self-cognition of the absolute idea, the epoch embodied in thoughts. This is from Spurgeon again, but the epoch embodied in thought refers to just like a higher synthesis. Like this is one of the great oppositions that Marx had with Hegel's idealism, an idealist dialectic that doesn't really have a grounding in material reality and just seeks like the final idea. This is a very simplified analysis and portrayal of it, though. I recommend you actually read Hegel to understand this. Back to the subject matter of Marxism-Leninism. No matter how fluffed up philosophy is, it either positions itself in a debate between idealism or materialism. A lot of first thinkers were actually like materialists. They were concerned with the way that matter, being molecules, atoms, whatever, were the basis of the universe, and we were only perceiving it. It's a very simplified history, but later on we had like a very religious framing where God created us, and we perceived reality, and we had ideas about reality, and our perception, our spirit, our soul was primordial, and it came before material reality. As science itself evolved, like I'm talking about the natural science, mathematics, physics, chemistry, these all were concerned with matters of the material world, the material reality. And we then had some sort of like scission with the social sciences, where social sciences often operated in very like either religious or very idealist ways. Idealism grew as a current that assumed some kind of like religious element. We're gonna get to this. Subject matter of idealism and materialism is what is the relation between thinking and being. And as Engels said in Ludwig Feuerbach and the End of Classical German Philosophy, the answers which the philosophers gave to this question split them into two camps. Those who asserted the primacy of spirits to nature and therefore, in the last instance, assumed world creation in some form or the other, comprised the camp of idealism. The others, who regarded nature as primary, belonged to the various schools, let's say, of materialism. I didn't write down the quote properly. Going back to science, we know that reality is fundamentally material. It precedes thought, as thoughts arise from matter. The mind is the result of complexly organized matter and stops to exist without matter. This might seem like a bold claim, but so was the claim of the various schools of idealists. Idealists who are very caught up in their idealism and think that the only world or the only reality that exists is that which they can perceive. If we seek to fix quote-unquote evils, I put this in quotes because evil is a moralist framing and that's not what we're concerned with as Marxists, such as poverty, suffering, hunger, war, imperialist occupation, genocide, in the case of Israel, Free Palestine. If we seek to fix them without a materialist grounding, we seek them in consciousness and operate on a flawed moralist conception. It gives us no opportunity to determine the main directions in which social life changes. We want to change ideas, but it's never actually going to change or seek to challenge the material reality, the material base, the material conditions which gave rise to these contradictions such as war, poverty, genocide, imperialism, which are contradictions that arise out of primary contradiction of capitalism being a class struggle. The bourgeoisie versus the proletariat. But we're going to get to contradictions later when aborting dialectics. Like in the idealist framing, you have like whims of people, imbeciles, great men, ideas, crazy people at the top of social hierarchies. All those exist in like this material reality. We're not denying this, like people can be like genuine fucking morons, but it is idealism to explain social life solely and primarily on these bases. To contradict this is to assert that the materialist grounding of all natural sciences shouldn't be applied to the field of social science. It is discarding the scientific method and the analysis of matter for a revised theistic idealism which seeks truth without matter. In a textbook by a Soviet press, was said, but all the attempts to do away with, in one way or another, the basic philosophical question will fall to the ground, because it is impossible to ignore the distinction between thinking and the object of thought, between sensation and that which is sensed. The motion of an object is one thing, but the object existing independently of that notion is another. So there is a difference between the subjective and the objective. What we perceive, our feeling, like if I rub myself, I feel, and there's the other act of like my other hand rubbing my fucking forearm. So there is matter that does shit, and there's you that feels it. Our consciousness is linked to the material world. Here lies the subject matter, the link between the spiritual and the material. But there is a second aspect to this, which is knowability, knowledge. Idealism and materialism, in their purest essence, are monistic. Monistic means they proceed from one definite principle. But some philosophies are dualistic and proceed from both the principles of idealism and materialism. And one of the examples is Descartes asserting that thought and matter are two separate things that exist independently of each other. And the thing is, when you assert those two things, you think that like matter and mind don't interact. And most of the time, as was analyzed by Marx, as was analyzed by Engels, paves the way to idealism. And this is what we call eclecticism, where you try to synthesize materialism and idealism, but in the end you just end up being wrong. This gives us, the groundwork to understand why idealism is not like a proper philosophical framework to change the world. If you only think that you exist in your own consciousness, in your own mind, why the fuck would you have like an incentive to change the world? If you think that ideas guide the world, why would you have an incentive to fundamentally change the material base of society? To wrap up this section, if the world is material and operates on certain laws, we can study it and understand it. If it is spiritual, it won't be the case. So materialism is inherently an argument that we can and should seek objective truth. And Immanuel Kant, positioned himself as an agnostic on the matter, thinking that we could only have certain knowledge about our own mind. The materialist truth is proven day in and day out with every new discovery in the scientific method itself. For natural sciences, we use the scientific method to discover stuff, and we analyze matter. If you go into the field of psychology, which is half concerned with the social sciences and the natural sciences, as a geographer, I hate the dissociation from natural and social sciences because it's idealist. Why do we have a split between the two when like the material and the spiritual are one of the same and they interact and they infinitely impact each other? Through science and praxis, we can get close to an objective truth. We don't claim to know the eternal truth because that would be dogmatic. And one of the main strengths of Marxism is that it is a philosophical framework of dialectical materialism, which constantly seeks to refine its method and its analysis. Let's talk a bit about dialectics and dialectical materialism. Right now, we've only had the part of materialism, and we haven't really analyzed what dialectics are. Marx took the dialectic method of Hegel, put it on its head, and that's what we're going to study in the field of dialectics. Something we always want to stress as Marxists is that our materialism is not mechanical. We don't assert that, the only thing that exists is matter, and the mind doesn't exist, and we can't affect change. No, otherwise, why would Marxism be a grounding for revolutionary change? Marxism asserts that matter affects human thought, and human thought, therefore, can affect change. And this is where we're getting into the thick of it, dialectics. In contrast to idealist conceptions of nature and knowledge, dialectics see nature as an interconnected whole, not isolated parts. It also views all matter as a constant state of change. Change happens quantitatively until a qualitative leap forward. Notably, the life cycle of a plant, right? If I take, for example, this Monstera minima, it starts as a seed, and it germinates, and from like the accumulation of light and water, it emerges from a seed into a plant, a stalk, and then it secretes auxins who grow this main stem, and then from there it develops more and more leaves, and the next qualitative leap forward from all this quantitative change from the leaves growing is... This is a bad example because this is a Monstera minima. In this case, I would be talking about a Monstera deliciosa. It grows a fruit. Contradiction is one of the more essential aspects of dialect. They are ubiquitous parts of all phenomena. Things have within them characteristics that are mutually exclusive, notably action-reaction, the relationship between the exploiter and the exploited. So contradictions are universal and particular, they're unique. And in this case, it's a process of like induction that leads to deduction. And then you rinse and repeat until you achieve another synthesis, and it goes on and on. Stages themselves are characterized by changes in the intensity of contradictions embedded into the larger one. Now, this may seem a bit abstract, but we're going to get into it. The principal contradiction defines other contradictions. It's the root one. The principal aspect, then, of the contradiction is that which dominates the dialectical relationship with another thing. Now, in capitalism, the principal contradiction is class struggle. The relationship between the bourgeoisie and the proletariat. Within the system of feudalism, it was the relationship between the lords and the serfs. When the principal aspect of a contradiction changes, so does the nature of that given thing. Lenin states that there is an absolute in the relative, the totality is within the specific, and vice versa. Therefore, there is a unity of opposites which don't exist without the other. There is no bourgeoisie without the proletariat, and the other way around is also true. The quantitative leap leads to a new contradiction, a new dialectic. There is constant non-linear motion. We're gonna see this notably with historical materialism, but we're not concerned with like linear progress necessarily. Not everything is linear. Sometimes things go back. And these are not Hegelian dialectics, they are Marxist dialectics. Hegel's dialectics was idealist. He was only concerned with matters of the mind, of the thought. Marxist dialectics operate on a materialist framework. Althusser, he argued that Hegel's dialectics were simple, and they recognized only one idealized contradiction, the supreme. So to sum up the laws of dialectics, we have three. The first one being that the accumulation of quantitative change leads to a qualitative leap forward. The second one is that of the unity and the interpenetration of opposites. Forces, or in this case of analyzing capitalism, that cannot exist without each other, collide and contradict each other. And on this, I have a very well-put passage by a Reddit user named Rosa Zetkin. The interpenetration of opposites is the same as the unity of opposites, but from a slightly different perspective. The unity of opposites is helpful in seeing the contradictions within a category. The interpenetration of opposites is helpful in seeing the unity of opposed categories. A physiological example. We, like all mammals, have a distinct and complete circulation of blood. There is fluid within our bodies differentiated as blood, contained in specialized vessels, which by circulating keeps our tissues in the chemical equilibrium in which they can survive. There is an opposition between the circulatory system and the rest of the body, between blood and interstitial fluid, etc. But the distinction can never be fully crystallized. There is always some communication between the blood and the interstitial fluid. That's the reason we evolved a circulatory system in the first place. These categories are defined, they are real, but they interpenetrate and are actually completely defined by their interpenetration. Similar thing in political economy, money and commodities. Seemingly separate things, so much so that economists who are thoroughly agreed as to labor time being the measure of the magnitude of value have the most strange and contradictory ideas of money. But the circulation of money and the circulation of commodities likewise interpenetrate. And we not only see that money is a commodity, but are also able, with Marx, to find the origin of money in contradiction internal to commodities. In the stage of inquiry here, one begins from interpenetration of opposites, and in the exposition speaks in terms of unity of opposites. They are the same thing from different angles. You don't have to fully grasp the distinction between the two, they're basically the same thing. But you need to know that opposites, they cannot exist without the other. The bourgeoisie can't exist without a proletariat, and a proletariat, by definition, being exploited by a bourgeoisie who appropriates their surplus value, cannot exist without the bourgeoisie. We're talking about the classes themselves, not the people, right? Not their labor, not being something that exists, materialized. We're talking about the classes. And the third law of dialectics is that of the negation of the negation. things clash with each other in their development, like the feudal elements and remaining and clashing with those of capitalism during the development of this new system. Dialectical materialism is therefore the synthesis of a materialist grounding, a materialist philosophy, and dialectics that operate on a materialist basis. Now, the other part of this, historical materialism. What is historical materialism? It is the application of materialist dialectics to the study of history. It is the assertion that material conditions give birth to ideas and movements, and then those ideas and movements, they impact material conditions by social change, praxis. It is a scientific tool to regard history. Materialism, therefore, does not negate the impact of man on material, but understands it dialectically. And as Marx said on the 11th thesis on Feuerbach, philosophers have only interpreted the world, but what matters then is to change it. The development of society is like economically contingent on the forces of production, tools, and the methods we use, either in industrial equipment, handheld artisanal tools. Do we divide labor, or are we working in a very like individual basis? Do we operate with machines? Is it simply hand tools? Are we in an agrarian society? These are questions we're concerned with. And the other part is the relations of production. So we're notably talking about like the economic base of society. Eras are usually historically progressive over one another. It's not linear. It's not a deterministic view. And it is something that we analyze with a dialectical scientific method. It's not, as a lot of critics say, Eurocentric. No, Eurocentric in the sense that Marx was talking specifically about Europe because that's where he lived, that's where he worked, that's what he analyzed. But if you apply the same dialectical method to other parts of the world, then you can achieve like a scientific analysis. And from this, we can also expand on like the base and the superstructure. The forces of production and the relations of production are the base, and those interact with the superstructure that are the state, media, ideology, right? They also impact, in return, the economic base. And so one thing that was very important to stress is that every qualitative leap in relations of production and in forces of production give the laborers or the economic class that is subordinated the means and the tools and the reasons for change. Because feudalism developed the material conditions for capitalism to arise, and capitalism develops the productive forces for socialism to arise. This is the framing we need as Marxists. Without a proper materialist grounding for our analysis of society and the relations of production and the forces of production and everything, we can really quickly fall prey to idealism. Here's a framing it ends up being all the time. Talking about authority as something that is like eternal and dissociated from the superstructure in the base. Authority as a mystical concept. These people operate on pure metaphysics. Liberal, happy fun, la la la. And it doesn't have an actual like analysis of the base of society. What are the relations of production? They can't tell you. They talk about like Soviet state enterprises as exploitative and but in a capitalist system, wage exploitation exists to effectively enrich a source of wealth accumulation for the bourgeoisie. And to not have any analysis of this is undialectical, it's un-Marxist, it's un-materialist, it's pure idealism. It also brings me to a quick rant about like how liberals operate. For them, everything is in a vacuum. Nothing ever stems from history, from material development, right? Like, it's a kind of fucking idiots who think that World War I erupted because someone shot Duke Ferdinand. This was not what happened. There were actual, like, concrete material reasons why this war happened. And this was a war for the division of the global south, of the rest of the imperial periphery between the nations of the imperial core, where Germany wanted a bigger slice of it. Why do they see history as like acts of individuals when you can have like a proper systemic analysis, a framework, which you can then use to change, like in a concrete manner, society? So if you've stayed this far, thank you for watching. I hope this expose of dialectical materialism was insightful. And in the next module, we're going to look specifically at political economy. What is surplus value? What is profit? What are prices, wages? What is capital? I think this is a very important thing to grasp. If you want to criticize capitalism, you first need to know what it is and how to profoundly change the material base that constitutes it. Bro. So I hope this was concise. There's always more and more to learn about dialectical materialism. There are many works which I've linked in the description to help you understand this better. So keep on learning, pick up a book, and join your local organization.